Hey folks, welcome back aboard. Life on a sailboat is full of beauty, but let's be honest, it's also full of stuff that breaks. Some parts just seem cursed, no matter how well you care for them. Today, I'm diving into 5 of the most common troublemakers. These are the bits and pieces that always seem to go wrong, often at the worst time. So grab a coffee or a cold one, and let's talk about the boat parts that love to break. Let's kick this off with the one system on board that everyone depends on but nobody wants to talk about, the head. Or, as I like to call it, the porcelain troublemaker. Doesn't matter if you've got a swanky electric flush or a good old manual pump, at some point it's going to break. It's like a rite of passage in boat life. Your first clogged head, your first joker valve replacement, your first mysterious smell you can't quite trace. I've had more run-ins with faulty heads than I care to count. One that sticks out was off the coast of Sardinia. Perfect anchorage, glassy water, dolphins passing by, and the moment I felt truly relaxed, I heard the worst sound a liveaboard sailor can hear. A weak gurgle, followed by nothing. The pump had seized. Took apart the whole system only to find someone had flushed a wet wipe. Took me 4 hours to get it sorted. 4 hours. In the Mediterranean heat, hunched over a smelly pump, wondering where I went wrong in life. The thing is, marine toilets are simple in theory but complicated in reality. They've got seals, valves, hoses, and pumps, and every part is just waiting for salt water, time, or human error to mess it up. The joker valve alone, a small rubber flap that keeps waste from flowing the wrong way, can ruin your week if it wears out. And they do. Often. Electric heads? Oh, they're smooth until the day they aren't. I had one short out during a lightning storm once. The motor fried, and just like that, I had to convert it back to a bucket for a week. Let me tell you, nothing humbles you faster than balancing on a bucket while the boat rocks side to side. And don't get me started on odor. A whiff of something funky, and you're down in the bilge with a flashlight chasing hoses, trying to figure out what's gone bad. Hoses permeate over time, and once that smell sets in, good luck getting rid of it. I've learned a few tricks over the years. Use vinegar flushes to break up buildup. Always keep spare joker valves on board, and never let guests flush anything they wouldn't put in their mouth. Harsh? Maybe, but effective. The head is the one thing on board that everyone notices when it fails, and it always seems to happen at the worst possible time, usually with guests on board or just after you've cleaned everything else. Boat karma, I guess. All you can do is be prepared, stay patient, and keep plenty of gloves on hand. And when it finally works again, and that pump hums like a dream, you'll feel like you conquered Mount Everest through a sewer. Next up is the unsung hero of boat life, the bilge pump. It's not flashy, it doesn't get much attention when things are going well, but when it fails, oh boy, it demands center stage. Think of the bilge pump as your boat's emergency drain. It's there, quietly working while you're cooking dinner or reading a book, making sure any water that sneaks in gets kicked back out. But if it stops doing its job, that water's got nowhere to go, and that's when things get scary fast. I've had bilge pump failures on calm days, during night sails, and once, memorably, during a channel crossing where it started taking in more water than I liked. I opened the hatch and found water lapping up toward the engine mount. Turns out, the float switch was jammed with a small sponge that had slipped down through a hatch. Just a sponge, but enough to keep the switch from lifting and triggering the pump. I had to bail with a bucket until I could clean it out and get things running again. Most electric bilge pumps die from one of 3 things: corrosion in the wiring, gunk blocking the intake, or the float switch sticking. That switch is particularly finicky. It's basically a tiny plastic lever that gets crusty over time, especially in salt water. If you've got an automatic system and that switch fails, the whole thing's useless. Another big problem is cheap wiring. Even so-called marine-grade wire can corrode if it's not sealed properly. I've opened pump panels and found green fuzz growing inside connectors. That's the kind of thing that doesn't show itself until you need the pump most, like in a storm, or when you're taking on water from a mystery leak. That's why I always carry a spare pump and switch, plus a manual hand pump for backup. And I test everything once a week. Doesn't take long, just a splash of water in the bilge and a quick look to make sure the pump kicks on. That little hum is music to a sailor's ears. It's funny, people think of the bilge pump as boring, but in an emergency, it's the most important piece of gear on board. It's your first line of defense against flooding, and sometimes your only one. When it works, you barely notice, but when it fails, you never forget. Keep it clean, keep it tested, and don't trust it blindly. Because the sea doesn't care if your bilge pump's on the fritz. It just keeps on pushing water in. Now, let's talk about the stuff that holds your boat together when the wind starts howling. Rigging and lines. Standing rigging, running rigging, halyards, sheets, blocks, shackles, the whole web of tension and trust that keeps your sails doing their job. If you think these parts are built to last forever, think again. I learned early on that lines don't just fail when they're old. They fail when they chafe, when they're poorly led, or when that one stainless steel shackle you thought was secure decides it's had enough. I had a halyard snap in the middle of a night sail once. Full mainsail dropped like a curtain on closing night. Turned out the rope had been rubbing against a sharp edge in the masthead for who knows how long. One minute it held, the next it didn't. And chafe? Chafe is like termites for sailors. It works slowly and quietly until one day, your Genoa sheet lets go under load and flaps into the sea like a wild snake. That's why I check my lines constantly, run them through my hands, feel for soft spots, inspect high stress points. If something feels even a little off, it gets replaced or rerouted. The same goes for standing rigging. I had a turnbuckle thread itself loose after a rough passage across the Bay of Biscay. I only caught it because the leeward shroud looked oddly slack at anchor. That's the kind of thing that could take your mast down if left unchecked. Sunlight is another silent killer. UV rays weaken rope fibers and cause stainless steel to pit and crack, especially at swaged fittings. You might not see it coming until it's too late, and you can't ignore blocks and winches. If they seize or crack, your whole system grinds to a halt. I keep spares, but there's only so much you can do at sea. Regular cleaning and greasing help, but sometimes a block just decides it's had enough and explodes mid-tack. So if you're out there relying on lines and rigging that haven't been checked in a while, do yourself a favor, go give them some love. They're your lifeline, quite literally. And don't cheap out on replacements. Trust me, the cost of a new halyard is nothing compared to the cost of losing control in a blow. Every time you hoist a sail or bear off on a strong reach, remember, you're only as secure as the weakest shackle. And in my experience, that weak link shows itself at the worst possible time. Electronics. The gadgets that promise to make life at sea easier until they don't. GPS, Chartplotters, depth sounders, AIS, radar, all fantastic tools, until they decide to take the day off. I've sailed with and without all the fancy tech, and let me tell you, when it works, it's brilliant. But electronics have a special way of failing when you really, really need them. Salt, humidity, corrosion, those are just part of the picture. Add in vibration, power surges, and the occasional lightning strike, and it's amazing any of this stuff works at all. One memorable failure happened just north of the Canary Islands. My chart plotter went dark, completely fried. No warning. I rebooted the system, checked the fuses, even swapped out the power cable. Nothing. I ended up using my backup handheld GPS and old paper charts, plotting positions like it was 1985. Made me glad I'd kept my sextant on board, even if it was mostly for show. Wiring is often the weak point. I've pulled apart panels and found corroded terminals that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Green crystals, rusted screws, and wires barely hanging on. That's with marine-grade everything. Saltwater just finds a way. Touchscreens are another headache. Try operating a touchscreen plotter in cold rain with gloves on. Or, better yet, try doing it after you've just slathered sunscreen on your fingers. Buttons and knobs might be old school, but they work in a storm. I'll take that over a frozen screen when I'm dodging rocks any day. I always tell folks, redundancy is your friend. I carry a handheld GPS, extra VHF radio, and old school paper charts. I've got apps on my phone and tablet with charts downloaded for offline use. Because once you lose your main system, you quickly learn how blind you are without it. Another tip, power protection. Use fuses and breakers wisely. Keep electronics off when starting your engine to avoid voltage spikes, and check your battery health often. Fluctuating power can fry sensitive gear before you even realize something's wrong. The truth is, electronics are fantastic tools, but they're not invincible. The sea is not a gentle environment for circuit boards and delicate screens, so trust your gadgets, but only as far as you can throw them, and always have a backup plan, because out here, there's no tech support hotline. There's just you, your wits, and hopefully, a compass that still points north. Last but not least,
from the
zippers,
fabric.
and
This
canvas.
is another one.
It might seem like a small issue compared to the head or rigging, but when your dodger rips or the bimini collapses mid-squall, it's a big deal. These are your shelter, your protection from wind and sun and spray. And the weak link in all of them? The humble zipper. Salt air is brutal on zippers. The teeth corrode, the sliders seize, and once they stop moving, you're in for a fight. I've snapped more zipper pulls than I can count, usually while leaning awkwardly over a winch in the middle of an unexpected rain shower. WD-40 can only do so much. And then there's the stitching. Even if the canvas looks good, the thread holding it all together slowly breaks down in the sun. One day, everything's fine. The next, a gust of wind tears your Dodger window open like a potato chip bag. It's amazing how quickly a torn seam can spiral into a bigger issue. Flapping canvas, broken snaps, zippers flailing in the wind. One time, sailing through the Greek islands, my entire bimini came undone in a blow. Stitching had rotted out, and the whole thing started peeling off like a sticker in a wind tunnel. I ended up tying it down with spare line just to make it to port. Sewing it back together under a shady tree with a sail needle and palm was oddly satisfying, but not the way I'd planned to spend my afternoon. You've also got to watch for mildew. Canvas that stays damp too long turns into a science experiment. Cleaning helps, but you have to stay on top of it. Air things out, use canvas cleaner, and never stow gear wet. What I've learned is this: treat your canvas like your sails. Inspect it regularly, rinse the zippers with fresh water, and keep a little sewing kit on board. I even carry spare zippers and sliders. It's a pain, but when one breaks at anchor and the rain's pouring in, you'll be glad you did. Canvas doesn't just protect you, it shapes the way you live on board. It gives you shade when you're eating lunch in the cockpit, it keeps your nav station dry, and it shields you from the worst of the weather. So when it breaks, life gets a lot less comfortable, fast. In the end, it's the little things that make the biggest difference on a boat. And zippers? Well, they may not seem heroic, but when they fail, they'll make you curse louder than a broken head. So, there you have it. 5 things that break most often on a sailboat, and usually when you least expect it. From the head to the humble zipper, every part of the boat has its own way of keeping you on your toes. But hey, that's part of the adventure, right? Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've got your own tales of gear gone rogue, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, fair winds, stay salty, and keep your toolbox close.